At this point in time, it is my honor to introduce you to my friend Adam Martin. Adam and I met when we were in Rotary together. And I didn't know all of Adam's story. When I met him, I just knew that he was a young man who cared about this community and he cared about people. And so as I've had a chance to get to know Adam better, I know how important it is for him to be able to give back and to give people a hand up because he's had that experience himself. And I want to have him have a very warm welcome. He's going to do an awesome job. Please welcome to the stage, Adam Martin.
Thanks, Kristi. Hi. I don't normally speak in front of crowds like this. I normally speak in institutions, detoxes, homeless shelters, jails, because that's where I came from. And so first I want to give a round of applause to Ken, because to me, you're the most important person in this room because of what you do. If we can give him a round of applause. I have a big heart for anybody who went through their struggles, whether it be homelessness or alcoholism or addiction, domestic violence, whatever it may be, and go back into those groups that are currently in that suffering and work with those people and try and pull them out of it, right? So my story consists of my mom and dad. They met in a drug and alcohol treatment center. So I was pretty much screwed from the start, right? Awesome people. My dad, he died a few years ago, died from alcoholism, had liver cancer, stuff like that. But there was 1 year that my dad was sober, and he was by far the most amazing person that I had ever met. He can't, I was in Boy Scouts and I didn't have time to build this Pinewood Derby car that I was supposed to do in 3rd grade. And my dad had some connections in the community to a wood shop, brought me to this school somewhere, and my dad and this guy built me this Pinewood Derby car, right? My dad's like 3 months sober or something like that. He just wanted to be a good dad, right? And the next day we go and we race them at Boy Scouts, and I took 3rd place, and I cried because I so badly wanted to win in front of my dad. And so my dad pulled me aside, and he asked me if I wanted to race to the end of the gym and back. And we raced, and like a good dad, he didn't let me win, right? But I felt better, right? And what I didn't know is that my dad was honorably discharged from the Army because he got in a car accident. And the private in the car that he was with, that he went to go pick up at the bar, had died in that car accident. My dad blamed himself because the alcoholic that he was, he went to the bar to pick him up and bring him back to base, but while my dad was there, he thought he would just have one. So the private died. My dad crushed his hip, was never able to really walk or run, but that day when my dad was 3 months sober, decided to run to the end of the gym and back and go through all that pain because he didn't want to see his kid cry. And that is the type of examples throughout my life that I've always had, but didn't realize until recently when I decided to put up the bottle. I was in the same situation as Ken. Like 3 years ago, I was homeless. Stayed at all the homeless shelters, went through all the treatment centers here, been to the Cass County Jail, been to the Clay County Jail, been to every institution that's available to a guy like me. Probably for the last 15 years until 3 years ago, I was in and out of these places. So I wouldn't say that homelessness for me was a problem. It was a result to something much bigger. It was alcoholism, addiction, whatever it was, right? Whatever would make me feel better right here, right now. Because if you knew what it was like to live my life, you would never ask me to stop drinking. You wouldn't care that I was using drugs. You'd just let me go sleep in a wet house and just let me be me, right? But deep down, I didn't want that. I just didn't know any other way. I currently am working with a guy right now who is in a treatment center, and he has nowhere to go. And he found out that he has to be out of the treatment center in 2 days. He's got no resources, right? So worked with the United Way. They put me in contact with Thomas, and Thomas threw me a bunch of numbers. I sent them over to my friend. He made the calls. They're working with him. They're going to find him a place to stay. Those are the type of resources that people from my community, the guys, the people that I hung out with, or that I was locked up with, really, we don't really know about, right? And I guarantee you that this person, if he, in 2 days, had nowhere to go, the first thing he's going to think is, what's the use? I'm no better than I was 28 days ago, right? And this isn't a knock on treatment centers, because you guys do amazing stuff. You bring out the problem and let them see what it really is. But there's so much more when we leave there that we have no clue. I didn't know how to use a checking account 3 years ago, right? I didn't have my driver's license. I had nowhere to live. I literally I didn't have a job. I got fired from my job that I was working at. And I put on my Facebook, I updated, I was like, I'm done with technology sales. I want nothing to do with it. Does anybody have a job? And this guy reaches out, he's like, hey, you should give High Point Networks a chance. I was like, I don't think you read the updates. You know? He's like, well, maybe you want to work for, they invest in their salespeople. They work with them. They give them the resources that they need, right? And I was like, well, I'll give it a try. And he got me an interview. I didn't even put in an application. He vouched for me, right? And that was the first time that I had learned that it takes a group of people to raise up an individual, right? And so he introduced me to Tom McDougall at High Point Networks. And when I walked in there was Tom, and there was like 6 other people that they were all interviewing me. I felt like I was like a monkey in a cage or something, you know what I mean? Like, this guy's homeless. And so I came in and I sat down. I was all dressed up with clothes I got at the thrift store. And they started interviewing me, and then Tom, he left the room real quick. He comes back, and he has 2 folders. One's really thick and one's really thin. And he looks at me, he's like, I'll let you guess which one's your background check, right? And he's like, we don't normally hire felons. I got 5 felonies on my record, right? And I asked Tom before I did this if this is, when I was asked to speak, if this was something that I could do, right? Because I was going to be raw and I was going to be transparent. Because I think that that's where the real help comes from with people like Ken, where they can identify him when he's behind the counter serving them food and know that he used to be in their spot, right? And I try to do the same thing. We just have different platforms of where we do it. But we're the same people, right? And so he's like, we don't normally hire felons, but we're willing to give you a shot. And he's like, so here's your contract, the thin folder, and he slides it across the table, and he's like, if you want the weekend, I'm signing it. And he's like, so here's the deal. The first year that you're here, go out and repair your name. Do what you got to do to make yourself successful. Any resources that you need, we're here for you. Right? The second year will be 50-50. Third year, you should be successful, and you shouldn't need anything from us, and then you can just boom. Right? And he held to his promise. I didn't sell anything for the first 9 months that I was there, right? In the sales world, you know you're going to get fired on Friday, right? 5 o'clock. Where's your cell phone? And he didn't cut my territory in half and double my quota or anything like that. I didn't even have a quota. He's like, just go out there and have high activity. Go out there and shake hands and get to know people and build relationships, network with people, right? And those are the types of things that the guys that I mentor, or going to the homeless shelters on Wednesday night, or the detoxes, or the institutions, I'm trying to relay to them, right? And I learned it from a guy who had no experience in being homeless. But he identified with me because we all have a struggle somewhere, right? And so I implore you that if you're here today, it's not just about the money, it's not just about nonprofits and stuff like that. Find someone and work with them. What's the worst that could happen? If you're if you're human resources and you're interviewing people and you come across someone that should not work there at all, give them a shot. What's the worst that could happen? I could probably name 100 guys that I know that have interviewed that have never had felonies and left their job after 3 days, or did something bad, right? We deal with it everywhere. Every business deals with it. And I guarantee you that if you bring on someone who has the experience, like the background that I do, and he gets it, and he understands the grace, he's going to be one of the most loyal workers that you have. He's going to go above and beyond because grace produces amazing action. I see it all the time. So to get back to my story, anyway. So my mom she was in treatment for a while. I never really saw her drink or do drugs or anything like that. When my dad left when I was 13, we moved into low-income housing, and my mom got an overnight job, and so left my brother and I was 13 and he was 10. I thought it was awesome, right? Especially in the summer where she was gone, or she was sleeping all day and then gone all night. I could do whatever I wanted. It got to the point where my mom's like, the only rule I have for you, Adam, is don't bring the cops home. I broke that rule every week. We didn't have a lot of money. All I really remember is that my mom worked all the time, and we had condiments in the fridge and breakfast pizza and pita bread. And every once in a while, the Swans man would come by, and my mom would just unload a bunch of money on them, and the fridge would get full and you got a 13 and a 10-year-old that have friends come over all the time, that food's gone in 2 days. Because it was new to us, right? So like when I meet a guy who spends all his money as soon as he gets his paycheck, I get it, because I did the same thing because I never had money. It felt good. And so anyway, I get into drinking and doing drugs and stuff like that, and my mom just, she's kind of a hardcore mom. She's like, you do the crime, you pay the time, right? She never bailed me out. I'd call her from the jail, and she'd just be, I'm not going to do anything for you, bud. You made your own bed. Like, she never enabled me. Before all this really happened, when I was going to juvenile detention and stuff, they let me play football at the Moorhead Junior High, and I got to be on the starting quarterback position. And I was good at sports. And there was 2 teams at Moorhead. There was the gray team and the black team. And I was a quarterback for the black team. And I was so selfish. When I played quarterback, I would never do the option to the halfback. I'd just run it up the side. And I remember one time I was running it up the side, and my mom was at the game, and she was out on the sideline, and she ran alongside with me all the way 80 yards, right? Like, you're thinking, like, that's an amazing mom. No, she beat me to the end zone, right? I was embarrassed. I was like, don't ever go to my games again. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, there's no, like, when you hear that the homeless is faceless, right? I don't necessarily think it's because, I think it's because any of us could be homeless at the end of the day. For him, his apartment got sold, right? He didn't make it happen. For me, I made it happen. Self-inflicted crises and drinking all the time and stealing cars, and to the point where I was in a jail in 6-point restraints with a helmet on full of blood. I just got tased and maced. They were bringing me to the rubber room. I know that you guys don't know what that is because you've probably never been locked up. But there's a room in there that's a rubber room because that's where they put the suicidal people at, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, like, this could be my bottom, right? Like, that's pretty low for a lot of people. And I remember thinking, like, this could be my bottom. I could actually get better from this point forward. And when I got out of jail, when I walked out of the jail and I realized I had nowhere to go, the thought I had was, what's the use? And I was drunk within an hour. And I just went through that cycle more and more. And it wasn't until I called a guy that I knew who had been sober for a long time and asked him for help when that all changed. The first thing he told me is, like, come over to my house. You can hang out with us, right? You can sleep on my couch, and we can just figure it out. We'll wing it, right? A lot of these guys are just winging it. They don't know where to ask for help or where to go. And I was like, all right, awesome, where do you live? And I was by the bowler in South Fargo. He's like, I live by the airport. I was like, I don't have a car, you know? He's like, walk here. And by the time I walked all the way there, and that first couple hours of my recovery or new life or whatever you want to call it, was the hardest. There's so many bars on the way there. And I didn't have any money, and I knew that if I walked in there, I could figure it out. I'll steal it if I have to. Like, because the way I feel, this anxiety that I have, my racing mind, the kids that I don't get to see anymore, the ones that I lost, one to adoption. Yeah, he's the innocent one. He was Captain America, and I was the Winter Soldier. That was our first Halloween together. He was 5. But I didn't get to see him. I didn't get to see my older son either. And those are the thoughts that run through my head. Like, what's the use? Why am I even doing this? I'm never going to see them anyways. I'm just going to end up drunk again, right? And it was the guys that had been sober, or guys like Tom at High Point Networks, who challenged the status quo and pushed me harder than I'd ever been pushed, because they knew that I could do it. My why, like I heard this guy give a talk about everybody knows the how and the what they do, but the why was gone, because I had been down this cycle so many times that it didn't matter anymore. And that day when I made that phone call and I walked all the way there, like it was 98 degrees outside, and I walked from the bowler all the way to the airport. My thighs were bleeding by the time I got there, because I'm chubby, right? It's like, chubby guys don't do this stuff. But when I made that walk and I realized that at the end of that walk that all I had to do was put an ounce of effort into my recovery, as I did into drinking, and the world, like, let's see what happens. And that was the constant message I was getting from others. Let's see what happens. Like, I know you've been down this road, but let's try it again. If it fails, let's try it again. And they never left. They stayed by my side the whole time. In the muck and the mire, service work. And so I challenge you that if you know someone who's homeless, or you know someone who's constantly being locked up, or has a drinking problem, or whatever, you do have something to offer. When I got my license, actually Tom's mom, Marilyn, brought me all the way to Langdon to get my license, because I couldn't wait 3 weeks for Fargo to open up, right? And we drove all the way there, and Tom was like, "Why are you with my mom?" And I was like, "I'm sleeping in your bed," you know. And we went and got my license back, and then I drove back to the. She let me drive her car back to the office. My mind was blown. I was 31 years old, right? I get back to the office, I'm like, Justin, our VP of sales, I'm like, "Dude, I got my license back." He's like, "Awesome, I've had mine since I was 16. You know, so. I'll end with this. Like, the relationship that I have at High Point is probably the best. They're like family. Like, I don't deserve it, you know, like, and it's fun, right? Because I lived a life that they never lived, and they're living a life that I'm starting to live. And they let me be a part of it. The other day, Tom was in Billings, and he called me on my cell phone. Never calls me on my cell phone, right? And he's like, "Adam, I got a room full of guys here. We got a question for you." I was like, "Awesome. I can do this. Here's my move to management," right? "I got this." He was like, "All right, this is very important. If the keys are left in a car, is it a felony?" He's like, "Well, Tom," so I appreciate the time. Thanks for letting me come and speak. Kristi and Christina, thanks for letting me come here. It's been an honor. And thank all of you. And like I said, I challenge you to find someone to work with. That's all I got. Thank you. Thank you.
Yep, that's how I pretty much feel about Adam, too. Honestly, Adam, thank you so much for coming. When I learned more about your story, it just made me so incredibly inspired, and I want to do more, because you are doing so much more for those that are around you and those that are going through this. And what you really humanize for us is how important it is to realize that no one their past shouldn't dictate their future. Because if we are looking at it that way, there is a whole population that we're missing out on, and that people need help and people need hope.